All right, so today we're diving into something pretty cool, actually. It's about Imperial College London.
Yeah.
They're opening up their first African Science and Technology hub.
Really?
Yeah. And get this, they chose Accra, Ghana, as like their main spot.
Wow, that's interesting. Because Imperial College, they already have those hubs, in other places that are like
Yeah.
big for innovation, like Singapore and San Francisco. And they're even, I think, planning on opening one in India next year.
Oh, wow.
But this whole focus on Africa, I think it's super interesting because it really shows that people are starting to see just how much potential the continent has
Yeah.
when it comes to science and tech.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It really makes you wonder, though, like, why Ghana in particular? What is it about their science and tech scene that, like, caught Imperial College's eye?
Right. Well, that's where our sources come in handy.
Yeah.
We've got this great article from University World News that breaks down all the hub's goals. And we've also got some super valuable insights from this guy, Dr. Harris Ando, who's a higher education researcher at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in Ghana.
Nice.
Yeah, he really helps us understand how this new hub kind of fits into what's already happening with research in Ghana.
Perfect. So let's start with like the basics then. What are they calling this hub and like what's the main thing they're trying to do with it?
Okay, so it's called Imperial Global Ghana, which makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's actually their third hub outside of the UK. So with this one, they're really aiming to boost collaboration in all these different areas, like research, technology, education, even entrepreneurship.
Oh, wow.
It's like they want to create this buzzing space where ideas can flow and innovation can just take off.
That's awesome. I was reading in the article that the president of Imperial, Professor Hugh Brady, he's got this pretty exciting vision for this hub.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so Professor Brady is super keen on using the partnerships Imperial already has with the University of Ghana and the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences.
Right.
He sees this hub as like a way to jumpstart even more collaborations across West Africa.
So it's not just like bringing what Imperial knows to Ghana, but like actually helping build up a whole network of experts in the region.
Exactly.
Right.
And what I think is even cooler is that they're really focusing on tackling these big global problems, like climate change, antimicrobial resistance, and getting prepared for pandemics.
Yeah.
Professor Brady really believes this hub can help launch new companies, create jobs in Ghana, and ultimately come up with solutions that benefit everyone in the world.
Now, those are some serious impacts.
Right.
I like that I remember that the article mentioned some new fellowship programs that are starting up at the same time as the hub.
Oh, yeah.
What are those all about?
Okay, so there are two main ones. The first is the Imperial Schmidt AI Fellows Program, and that one's all about connecting early career researchers from Ghana with Imperial's AI Center in London.
Cool.
It's a fantastic way to share knowledge and build skills in AI, which is, a super important field these days.
Totally. And I think there was another program that focused on climate change and urbanization, right?
Yep, that's the Ames Imperial Global Fellows Program, which is bringing 40 doctoral researchers to Accra to specifically learn about those topics.
Wow.
It's a direct response to some of the biggest challenges the region and the world are facing.
Makes sense. So they're really hitting the ground running with all these different initiatives.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Now, I'm curious to get Dr. Ando's take on all this. Since he's based in Ghana, what does he see as the potential benefits of this hub?
Well, Dr. Ando is a huge advocate for science and technology hubs, especially in Africa. He believes they're absolutely crucial for making national research systems stronger. He also points out that Ghanaian scientists are already leading the way in certain areas like climate change research and public health, which, lines up perfectly with what the hub's focused on.
That's awesome. So it sounds like there's already a solid base for collaboration there. The article mentioned some pre-existing initiatives too, right?
Yes. Dr. Endo brings up things like the West African Science Service Center on Climate Change and Adapted Land Use.
Whoa, what a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tongue twister. It's called WASCAL for short.
Okay, much better.
And then there's also the Global Change in Hydrological Cycle in the Volta Basin Project, or GLO Volta.
I see.
Both of these show that there's already a commitment to working together on climate change research and water management in the region, which basically creates this perfect environment for the new hub to join in.
Makes sense. Working within those existing frameworks could really help the hub make a bigger impact. I do have to wonder about the money side of things, though. How sustainable is this hub in the long term?
That's a really good question, and Dr. Ando actually talks about that directly. He emphasizes that the government funding for research and development in Ghana is pretty limited, which often shows up in low gross enrollment ratios for higher education.
Yeah.
So partnerships like this one with Imperial College become super important.
So you're saying the hub could end up being a really valuable source of funding and resources for researchers in Ghana.
Exactly. It can help
Yeah.
fill those gaps and allow Ghanaian scientists to do some really groundbreaking research that they might not have been able to do otherwise.
Yeah.
But, like with any big project, there are always challenges to think about.
Oh, I bet. What kind of concerns does Dr. Ando have?
So one of the things Dr. Ando is most worried about is that they might end up duplicating efforts, especially in areas like climate change and health research.
Right.
Like there's already been a ton of work done in those areas. So he's saying they really need to make sure this hub is actually adding something new.
Makes total sense. We don't want to see resources wasted on projects that are just repeating what's already been done.
Exactly, especially when there's so many unique challenges that need like fresh ideas and approaches.
For sure. Are there any specific areas where he sees that overlap happening?
Yeah, he points to those projects we were talking about before, like Wasco and Jalua Volta.
Right.
Since they already have such a strong focus on climate change and water stuff, the hub needs to be super careful not to just do the same things.
I gotcha. So it's all about finding those niche areas where the hub can really contribute something different.
Exactly. He suggests focusing on building what he calls new and relevant niche areas within climate change and health research.
I like that. What kind of things does he have in mind?
Well, he doesn't give super specific examples, but he talks about how the hub could maybe investigate how climate change is impacting certain farming practices in Ghana,
Interesting.
or explore new ways to deliver healthcare in cities that are growing really quickly.
Okay, yeah. So using their expertise to tackle very specific problems.
Exactly. It's like this balancing act,
Yeah.
using what we already know, but also carving out those new areas of research.
It sounds like it would take a lot of communication and collaboration between the hub and the researchers who are already working in Ghana.
Oh, definitely. And that actually brings us to another important point that Dr. Ando makes.
Okay, what's that?
He says the hub really needs to make sure it's aligning with the frameworks that already exist.
Frameworks like what?
So he's talking about things like Ghana's strategic development plans
Right.
and also the frameworks set by the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS.
Gotcha. So making sure the research they're doing actually fits into those bigger goals.
Exactly. Otherwise, it's like they're off doing their own thing and the research might be interesting, but it won't actually help with the real challenges on the ground.
I see what you mean.
Right.
It also makes me think about data sharing. Is the hub going to be able to access all the information it needs?
That's a great point. And Dr. Ando talks about that too. He says there's already tons of data on climate change and health in Ghana.
Right. Years and years of research.
Exactly. So instead of starting from scratch, he thinks the hub should really tap into what's already there.
Much more efficient.
Exactly. He specifically suggests that universities and research councils take a good look at their existing collaborations and figure out where the hub's expertise could be the most useful.
Yeah, so it's all about building on what's already been done and not trying to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And that really highlights how important partnerships and good communication are going to be for this whole thing.
For sure. There's one more challenge that Dr. Ando mentions that I found really interesting.
Oh, what's that?
He talks about how research findings in Ghana and across Africa often don't get used.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that.
Even when the research has clear implications for policy, it doesn't always actually make its way into decision making.
Yeah, it's like all this knowledge is just sitting there not being put into action.
Exactly. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not just about doing the research, it's about making sure that research actually leads to something.
Right. And that's where Dr. Ando sees a big opportunity for Imperial Global Ghana.
Interesting. Tell me more.
He thinks the hub should really prioritize translating their findings into actual policies and practices, things that will directly help communities.
So not just focusing on the academic side, but thinking about the real-world applications from the start.
Exactly. He even suggests that the hub could help facilitate those conversations between researchers, policymakers, and communities.
Oh, that's a cool idea. Almost like they're acting as a translator, helping everyone understand each other.
Yeah, exactly. And that can be really powerful because it makes sure that everyone's on the same page and working towards the same goals.
Makes sense. So basically, Dr. Ando sees this hub as having the potential to be more than just a research center.
Right. He thinks it could be a driving force for positive change in Ghana and beyond.
Wow, that's a pretty big vision.
It is. But he's also realistic. He
Yeah.
knows that there are going to be challenges along the way. Like we talked about, avoiding duplication, making sure it's sustainable, aligning with what's already happening, and actually translating research into action.
Yeah, those are all really important points. It sounds like a pretty tall order.
It is, but it's
Yeah.
also super exciting.
Yeah.
What do you think? Are you optimistic about the hub's chances of success?
Yeah, I think so. I am optimistic. But like Dr. Anda said, you got to be a little cautious too. They've got this amazing vision, but whether they succeed really depends on how they handle those
Yeah.
challenges. What really stuck with me was what he said about how research doesn't always get used.
Right.
It's like that gap between knowing something and actually doing something about it.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this one time I was reading this super interesting study about sustainable farming practices,
Hmm.
but it was like stuck in this academic journal. It wasn't reaching the farmers who could actually use that information.
It happens all the time. And that's why I think it's so cool that this hub could be a knowledge broker.
Yeah.
Imagine if they could do the research. A&E find ways to share it, like creating easy to understand summaries or doing workshops or even teaming up with local media.
Yeah, like a science communication team, but specifically for Ghana.
Exactly. And that kind of impact can be tough to measure.
Right.
It's not as simple as counting publications or patents.
Right. It makes you think about how we actually define success for something like this.
Totally.
And that's something I'd love for our listeners to think about too. Based on what we've learned from Dr. Ando about sustainability and impact and all that, what would you use to measure whether Imperial Global Ghana is successful 5 years from now?
Good question.
Hmm.
Would you look at how many new businesses got started because of the hub? Or maybe how many policies got changed based on their research?
Well, maybe it's about how strong those regional research networks become, or how many Ghanaian researchers are leading international projects,
Huh?
or even how people in Ghana view science and technology now compared to 5 years ago.
Yeah, there are so many possibilities. And that's what we're all about with these deep dives,
Yeah,
getting you to think critically and engage with these complex issues.
for sure. And if you want to learn more about all this, we've got links to that University World News article and some of Dr. Ando's work in the show notes.
Definitely check those out.
Yeah,
We always love hearing what you think too. So come find us on social media and let us know what your metrics for success would be.
Great idea. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.